Back in the land of Lincoln, Illinois workers with a newborn in the NICU will soon have additional access to job-protected unpaid leave. Governor J.B. Pritzker signed the Family Neonatal Intensive Care Leave Act earlier this year. It requires employers with between 16 and 50 workers to provide up to 10 days of unpaid leave to employees who have a child in the NICU. Larger employers must provide up to 20 days. The law applies to both part and full-time workers. Employers covered under the law must maintain their employees' health insurance benefits and guarantee their reinstatement upon the conclusion of leave. Employers can't force workers to exhaust their paid leave instead of unpaid NICU leave, though employees can take it if they choose. Violations may result in fines of up to $5,000. The law goes into effect on New Year's.